Master Kelvin, and welcome to Anime Paint Night for this month. So, inside your kit, we should have our reference sheet, and our reference sheet should feature our main target for this month. It's going to be Luffy from One Piece. And for our Luffy, we have the time skip Luffy, and we also have Gear 5th. And that'll make a little bit more sense. For the line art, I have it's going to be Gear 5th Luffy, right here, yes, and then we have watercolor as well, and make sure that you get like a little bit of water, some paper towels, and that'll be helpful. So let's go ahead and get started.
Alright everyone, so let's go ahead and get started. Now, as per usual with our anime paint nights, we usually start with the skin tone first. So get a generous amount of water, and then go right for the brown. And go ahead and put a little bit on there. And then we're going to do some little specks right on the face. Use the water to spread it around to kind of match more with Luffy's skin tone here. Alright, so go ahead and get a little bit more. Want to make sure that the color is there. I know it doesn't look like there's too much there due to the fact that the light that's shining in from the window where I'm at is kind of adding a little bit of glare, but I promise you there is definitely paint right there and such. As you can see, I added a little bit more of a darker like tone, or a little bit more of the brown without the water for the ears and the neck and such. But then I'm just kind of lightly putting a little bit of that skin tone right underneath the hair and the eyes, like so. This one doesn't look like it has too much going on in terms of the skin tone, so we should be moving on to the next part pretty quickly. Just want to make sure that we're good. Then we're going to move on to the hands. Yep. Now, I made a little bit of a mistake there. Each of the dabs of the paint were a little bit darker than I'd like, so I was going to add a little bit more water and such just to match it a little bit better with Luffy's skin tone, but it still turned out pretty well. Using the water to just lighten it up just a little bit. There we go. Trying to be as accurate as I can. Then, because of how much pigment was actually on the hand, I was able to use it on the arm that's on the bottom right hand corner and such. Yep, there we go. Very good. Then we'll go back. I believe we're going to get a little bit more water and a little bit more paint. And I think we're going to either work on the shading of the arm or the chest. Let me see which one we're due. I'm very curious. Oh, we decided to work on the eye. So for the eye, because it's like Gear 5th Luffy, or like Luffy like changing into Gear 5th, I decided to use the Gear 5th like eye color. So I used a little bit of pink and a little bit of purple, and I just dabbed it a little bit to put it where the eye is. I did not realize I did that. Then I started moving over the chest, and he has a scar, and because of the scar, we're actually going to go back and darken up those like triangles that you see there. It's an X, but since it's profile, we just kind of have like little triangles shooting out. But yeah, let's move on to the next part. Alright, so now that we've got our skin tone and the eye color down, we are going to start moving on to one of the next most important parts of Luffy here. We're going to start moving on to his clothing. So first we're going to go ahead and get the red, because this isn't like the pure, like, for me, you can do this in two different ways. You can use his colors that are like for his time skip outfit, which is like both of them are, you can kind of see on the reference sheet. you see the red option, and you also see the Gear 5 option. But because the Gear 5 option is like white and such, there's not a lot of color. I decided to do a little bit different. I decided to go with the red because that can kind of blend into turning into Gear 5. It's like a concept of like, whoa, he's not in Gear 5 just yet, he's transforming. So that's why I'm using a lot of red for like the sleeves. Don't forget, his waistband is also yellow and such. It's not really a waistband. I didn't mean to say that. Sash. His sash is yellow. So we're going to go ahead and move on with the hat, which is consistent all the way around, whether it's Gear 5 or his regular version. We have red on the striped version, or on the stripe. And then we're going to move on to our... get a little bit more red there. Oh yeah, has a little bit of a coat there. That. And then for the inner part of the sleeve, add a little bit of black and a little bit of red. Because, since it's the inside of the sleeve, it's going to be darker. Light isn't really getting in there, so add a little bit of red, add a little bit of black. So the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to move over to the yellow and put it on the hat like so. There you go. Let's start a little bit light. Take your time gradually putting it on. There you go. And then you don't have to go all the way to the edge of the page. I just decided to do that. Then add a little bit more yellow for wrapping around the hat. I really like the Gear 5 design, and I was a little bit nervous of trying to incorporate it into the anime Paint Night because of the fact that it is not exactly the most colorful in terms of what we can do, but I decided to take a risk and try to give you all an option where it's you can either do it in a more traditional sense of I want to do Gear 5 Luffy. There's some purples in there, I'd like to do that. Or if you'd like to try to do time skip Luffy with his attire, but also just, having a little bit of Gear 5 elements. It was a little bit of a risk this time, but I hope you all enjoy it still. Once you're done with the hat, go ahead and add a little bit of pigment to the rope that connects his hat to his waist. And then we'll move on to the next part. Alright, so for the next part, I'm going to start doing the larger sleeve that we have right in front of us. And so for me, my choice, I'm going to do a little bit of a combination. So for the majority, I'm going to be using red. I'm going to start out pretty heavy on the edges of the sleeve, but as it gets closer to, those little wisps, those clouds that you see on the edge of his sleeve, I'm going to start lightening it up. So it kind of makes it seem like the red is transitioning into white. I'm going to kind of make it a little bit more airy, a little bit more wispy as I do the coloring. Again, you don't necessarily have to do this, but I just figured, if you like a little bit of a challenge, or if you like a different technique, you could try this as well. But basically, your main job here is to, as you're getting further away from his chest, I want you all to or if you decide to do this route, try lightening up on the red a little bit, just to make it seem like it's transitioning into the white, basically suggesting that he's transforming into Gear 5 Luffy and such. Now, I added a little bit of purple as well, not too much, and as you can see, I definitely brought back the water and such to blend it a little bit better with the red. But the reason why I did is because if we look at the reference sheet, despite there not being a lot of color for Gear 5 Luffy, there is a great deal of accents with purple and such. So I think, in addition to white, I think purple is a good symbol for Gear 5th. I added a little bit more pigment for the edges just to make sure that it's strong red on the sides. And then I start like stippling or just like tapping the brush just a little bit, going on to just like smooth it out a little bit, just to make the sleeve be a little bit more even and such. But also, if you haven't actually seen the scene where Luffy turns into Gear 5th Luffy, please do. Please do. A wonderful masterclass in animation, and it's just sick. He's so cool. He looks like a genuine cartoon character. Now, if you notice, I did a little bit of red behind him because, that's still his coat that he's wearing, but I added a little bit too much, so I used the paper towel to lighten it up, actually, just to give a little bit more of that consistency with the fact that you are transforming Luffy into Gear 5th. Now, that being said, let's move on to our last and most challenging portion. Alright, you know what it is. I usually save this for last, and here we are doing it again. The hair. Alright, so this was a little challenging because I was doing the transition thing from regular Luffy to Gear 5th. So the little pieces of hair that are like really spiky, I wanted it to be the color of his regular hair, which is black. So I decided to use a little bit of black on the edges and such, just for the tips, make sure really, really severe. Then use the water again. I was like really, really nervous about this, so I started like stirring it a lot. But I used a little bit of water to kind of like have it transition from black to gray and kind of hang out with a little bit of like specks on the edges of the Gear 5th hair and such, just to have it be like, yeah, it's transitioning from his regular hair to the Gear 5th hair, just a little bit. Now, the next thing that I'm going to do, I'm curious what I'm aiming for here. What am I looking for? Okay, so what I'm doing right here is I'm experimenting with the colors that I'm trying to use for Gear 5th. And I tried to use magenta and light blue, and I'm pretty sure I didn't like what I saw. So I think what I did then, I think I used magenta, purple, magenta, and I think I was very satisfied with that. So once I'm like content, then I'll start going back to painting on Luffy. I was like really nervous about this, I'm not gonna lie. So like again, there's not a lot of color in that Gear 5th hair. But if you look at the reference sheet, like especially the statues, there's a lot of purples. You can even see a little bit of the purple in the wisps of his hair. So that's what I'm going to try to do here. First, I add a little bit of purple, and I like speck it, so it's not too intense in terms of color. I'm just trying to speckle it, just trying to see how it looks. And I'm like, at this point, I'm like, I don't know. That's kind of really heavy purple and stuff. I don't know about that. So I start speckling a lot more places, and I'm like, maybe if I keep doing it, it'll look better. I do it on the eyebrows as well, and as I continue, I'm like, oh, okay, this is pretty good. It's pretty interesting. So adding a little bit of specks on the edges of the hair are pretty good. So then after that, I continue on, and I'm like, that's too deep purple, and so then I start using a little bit more of the magenta. And that's when I start realizing, okay, all right, we actually can do this and such. It starts out pretty heavy once you get a little bit more paint, but you can use that on the other parts of his hair to just give off that vibe of the accent of purple that we want, instead of like the severe, like his hair is not purple. His hair is white with purple accents. That's what we're trying to go for. Because ultimately, we do still want to show that the whiteness of like the hair and stuff like that. It almost looks like steam. And like if we know anything about Luffy, steam is he's not too far off anytime when he like all the gears have like some semblance of steam and stuff. Like Gear Second, like when he was like really really upset and stuff like that, and his skin turns red, but like there's steam coming off of it. Or like Gear Fourth, like despite how ridiculous it looks, it's a lot of steam. Like it's steam coming out of his mouth and such. Yeah, so that's what we're trying to do here. So take your time with this. Again, you don't have to necessarily do it like me. Like I really took a gamble here. But like as you can see, if you stick with it, it actually can. It turns out pretty well, you know. It's unique. It's artistic interpretation. You might not agree that it looks well. I totally understand, but like, it's what we have. It's what we got. So let's move on with a little bit more of the wisps. And I think once we've gotten most of the wisps down and the color in, what did I decide to do? I decided to add a little bit more shading towards certain areas. So for the skin tone, I added a little bit of shading towards the chest and the arms and the palm of his hand. So I added a little bit more brown there. And a little bit more brown towards his wrist as well. I got a little bit more water, and I started getting a little bit more paint, and I started going towards the neck, underneath the chin, and right above his like forehead and such, just to have a little bit of shading there. Also with the ear. And then I used a little bit of water to spread that around to have it a little bit more even. But we just want a little bit of depth. We just want a little bit of depth. A little bit more depth underneath where the hair is and such, just to have a little bit of shading. It's important. Shading is very important. Add a little bit of shading where the nostril is, a little bit more for the arm. And at this point, you know, I think the cool thing about like doing activities like this with y'all is you're not really sure if it's gonna look good, but as you keep going, you're just like, you just gotta stick with the process. You might be very, very happy with what you got. And again, yours isn't gonna look like mine. And you also still might be a little bit nervous about that. But I just want you to know, regardless of what you decide to do or route you decide to take, just be happy with your artwork. Just be happy with it because you started from zero, started from scratch. So that's pretty much it. That's Gear 5th Luffy, or Luffy transforming into Gear 5th. And we're going to see you next month. So well done. Thanks for sticking with the challenge. And I'll see you next time. Bye.